And we're back. And so this is a band that only made one EP, or one LP, I should say. And they have a very interesting story, very different kind of background to the other two artists that we've talked about this week, and very different sound too. I wouldn't, based on our conversation with 13th Floor Elevators, I would say this band is very different, and they're coming from a different viewpoint as well, led by the lead singer, Joseph Bird, or not the lead singer, but the head of the band, essentially, the lead composer. So let me get into a little bit of the history of this band, since this is the only time we'll be talking about them. Right from the get-go, this band is on this list because it was a pioneering band in its use of electronics and electronic sounds and electronic music, to the point where it's said that it influenced the krautrock sound later on, in the 70s and 80s. There is, I'll get a little bit into the electronic aspect of that in a little bit. But this band is headed by and founded by the lead composer, Joseph Bird. He is a composer first and foremost. He was also a keyboardist. He was working as a composer before starting this band. He was involved in the experimental art scene in New York City, and was part of the Fluxus movement. And the Fluxus movement was basically an experimental art group of all different backgrounds and types of people who were interested in setting up performing arts shows. And it was, the ideology was doing like performative art without worrying about like the results or the impact. It was more about the experimentation. Prominent people in that movement in New York City, or I guess it was around the world, but he was in New York City at the time, were Yoko Ono and John Cage. They're some of the more people I recognized, at least when reading about it. Anyway, he was working in New York City when he met the lead vocalist that became this band, Dorothy Moskovitz. He then went to UCLA in 1967 to work at UCLA and pursue a doctorate in ethnomusicology, and he met a lot of different people there while at UCLA. He didn't last long at UCLA. He was teaching and pursuing a doctorate, and then he decided to leave and become a composer full time. So while he was in LA, he formed like this music collective, and was composing music and working with all different types of music and people. And he then started the band in 1967, the United States of America band, with Dorothy and with other students from UCLA. And his ethos for this band was, quote, an avant-garde political musical rock group with the idea of combining electronic sound, not electronic music, and musical and political radicalism and performance art. So he really had strong artistic ideas about what this band was supposed to mean, what he wanted it to accomplish, in differentiation from like 13th Floor Elevators, who wanted to do drugs, and that didn't guide him. He was a music person first and foremost, and an artist as well. And another interesting quote was that he admitted to getting into rock music without knowing anything about it or its history when making this album, which is probably why it sounds so unique compared to other rock albums at the time. They named the band the United States of America. It was it was supposed to be intentionally provocative and was a statement against the U.S. political agenda. Now, the members of the band, we've got Joseph Byrd. He played the electronic music, the electric piano, harpsichord, organ, calliope. Dorothy Moskowitz was a lead vocals. Gordon Marin was the electric violin and ring modulator, which is one of those electric instruments. It is the best way I can describe it when listening to this album is it kind of makes like this weird space noise, space sounds. Rand Forbes was the fretless electric bass. I don't know what the significance of it being fretless is, but that was noted. Craig Woodson was on percussion, and Ed Bogus was credited as having some of the lyrics and keyboards.
Ed Bogus.
Yeah, Ed Bogus.
Nice.
This album was recorded in December of 1967 at Columbia Records, and it was produced by David Rubinson, and the highest it ever reached was 181 on the Billboard 200. The band fell apart shortly after this album was released in 1968 due to a variety of reasons, artistic differences, people wanted to do different things in the band, unhappiness with the record label, and I think Joseph Byrd really just kind of wanted to do something else as well. You'll notice there's no guitar on this album. They used keyboards, strings, early electronics, and synthesizers. I did read a little bit more about the electronic portion of it, but it kind of was pretty advanced, and I don't know anything about electronic music or specifically the instruments, but it's basically like early synthesizers that they used on this, and a lot of it was very like analog versus and manual recording of electronic sounds versus like digital type of stuff. So my question to you guys, now that I've kind of given a background on the band, is there anything that you had of value listening to this album beyond the historical importance of it being on this list?
I love this album. Loved everything about this album. So I can tell already that we're going to have a difference of opinion on this one for sure.
Yeah, okay. Yep. Interesting.
But I'll let Matt go since we have a clear differentiation between our take. But Matt, where did you stand on this?
Maybe I fall in the middle because I really did like this album. I don't know if I would go so far as to say I loved it, a la Pretty Things. But I did like this. This was a much more interesting listen, even though it's still in the realm of psychedelic rock. I appreciated this a heck of a lot more than the 13th Floor Elevators. So, no, I definitely am a solid like on this.
And okay. I would say, like, can I go, Josh, if you don't mind, give a little bit, and then you can count. So
yeah, go for it.
I remember Matt specifically saying with the Pretty Things and you guys joking, I hope you stumble into an album that you enjoy as much. That would be this album for me.
It's fun,
I didn't know much about it. Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, even the gimmicky stuff is gimmicky in an interesting way. Like there was like a space sound on one thing, but it didn't overwhelm it in any way like that Electric Jug did. I mean, if we talked about the Monks being the beginning of sort of krautrock and avant-garde, this even more so. I mean, all the way down to like not even being rooted in Western, American/British themes, right? Mm-hmm. The whole idea of krautrock was to reinvent that, right? These guys were. It's funny that you say he didn't have any knowledge of rock because you can see how he was an innovator on that front. It also almost sounds like a trip hop shoegaze album at different times too. Like I would describe it as like sometimes she sounds like Beth Gibbons from Portishead, sometimes she sounds like Debbie Harry singing psych rock from Blondie, and other times she almost has that like atmospheric sound of like Dominique Durand from Ivy, kind of just flowing into the background. Particularly on the third song, The Cloud. I really love this album. I thought it was very interesting. I thought it was doing all kinds of, every song was different. Every song was interesting in its own way, even the ones that weren't total hits. I can't say enough about it. It's a definite listen, and it's incredibly well produced too, which You know, the first album I felt was not super well produced, the 13th Floor Elevators. The Nina Simone album was lightly produced because you've got freaking Nina Simone. You just put that voice up front. You know, how could you not produce that, right? This one, on the other hand, was very interesting. I even know the answer, Josh, to the fretless bass because I can remember toying around with learning to play the bass. And besides the fact that the fretless bass is way easier to play than a normal bass, the idea behind the fretless bass is it makes it easier to slide on the chords, so it allows you to change chords much easier when you're playing the fretless bass. So perhaps it was kind of designed to give you that vibration feel that comes from not sounding perfectly in tune, right? That's the best way I describe the fretless bass. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, and funny you should mention Portishead. They have said that this band was an influence on them.
Oh, absolutely. How could you not? I mean, it sounds like a trip hop album, like 25 years in advance.
Yeah, yeah. I go ahead, Matt. What about you? What are you?
So
what are you thinking
this to me sounded like it's almost like a thesis for like an art student. You know, it's just like let's just try to let's incorporate all kinds of stuff going on. I mean, just right off the bat, they open up with like the American Metaphysical Circus. Starts off, it's like a combination. It's like the Calliope, a marching band, ragtime piano, kind of all just fading in and coming out within each other. And it's just right off the bat, it's like, all right, this is going to be a little bit of a different listen. But I agree with John. I think that the variety here is great. You're hearing a lot of different things. I'm surprised, actually, that there's some songs on here that I'm like, wow, there's no guitar on that. It sounds like a guitar. So it must be the way that they're doing the bass. Yeah, it must be the way that they're doing the bass or something like that. Or
well, the bass lines tie everything together. The bass lines tie everything together on this album. It's very versatile, which once again, I think is why that fretless bass is used.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Cloud Song, it's almost like that sounded like a harp. You know, that I didn't see any people credited with a harp.
That's the exception to the rule, though. Most of the songs have the bass line, everything's layered around it.
Right. Yeah. But no, I thought it's a very interesting listen. And even songs like it's like I didn't walk out of here going, I loved every song. I'm not quite like John, but like even a song that I didn't really connect with all that much, I still was interested in listening to. And I didn't want to turn it off or anything like that. You know, even the last track, which is kind of like what is the American Way of Love, which to me sounded like if the Beatles did Revolution 9 like this, I could listen to Revolution 9 because this is just, it starts off with kind of there's like a structure to it, and then it just sounds like they're just taking a bunch of bits and pieces of songs from the album and throwing it in there and replaying them over and over again and kind of mix matching. You know, it's at least there's songs and parts of songs in here. You know, Revolution 9 is just a bunch of noise, but so even something like that, which is a little cacophonous, it's still very listenable, I think.
Did you get the feel, Matt, that like that last song, and I don't know this for a fact, but it felt to me, the beginning song, you're going into the funhouse, and the exit song, because it is. It's like it plays back all 9 songs in small snippets, like as if you're having a flashback to all of it, and then it transitions you out, and it even ends with the same circus music that you began with, right? So I feel like one song you enter the funhouse, and then the final song you exit it, and that's how I felt, which was very fitting, I thought, for me, because once you're in the funhouse, you're getting all kinds of what I would imagine to be like psychedelic / avant-garde directions that you're being taken.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. So Josh, where were you? So you're not a fan?
I was kind of mixed on this album. I really do not like the kind of opening. I respect like kind of the collage aspect of it. I think that's innovative, but I can never hear Calliope ever again and be fine with it. And I don't think it belongs on like rock albums ever. It's just it's a barrier to entry for me, especially as the opening track. Something like that. It doesn't make me interested. It just makes me say like, what the fuck is this? Wow. So okay. I guess that's kind of that's kind of my holdup. But like I did like some of the other stuff, and I think that was probably because it was more mainstream sounding, like the Garden of Earthly Delights. That's kind of and like Hard Coming Love. I really liked and responded to those bass line. I could pick out those bass lines pretty strongly for some reason on this album, and I can't always do that. And I like the I don't know, it just, I guess I was able to grasp onto those types of songs more versus like Where's Yesterday that has the chanting that kind of like put me off, and some of the electronic sounds also like was kind of hard for me to get into. It just reminded me of like 50s like sci-fi special effects sounds and stuff. And yeah, so that's kind of where I'm coming from with this album.
It's going to be interesting, Josh, as we get more into like Frank Zappa and some of the experimental stuff and the krautrock and stuff, because this is portending that, and it'll be interesting to see as you hear more of this type of stuff, if your palate starts to develop for it, or if it just becomes a style of music that is not your, because this is going, Matt, I don't know if you would agree, but this is going to lead you into some stuff that we're going to be seeing pretty down, especially avant-garde stuff.
Yeah. No, I get that. One thing I wanted to say, another quote that Joseph Bird said about some of the songs on these albums I thought was interesting. So the opening and closing tracks, he said, were, quote, comments on the media as a means of thought control and the bourgeois sentimentality of the hippies, summer of love compared with the realities of love under capitalism.
Well, the lyrics has well, and I didn't get that, but I will tell you the lyrics in the first song, like I put out one that's there. If you're harder yet to please, we have most delightful dreams. Our recorders will preserve the intensity and passion of your screams. I mean, that's some heavy stuff right there, man. That's like dystopian. So, yeah. And not forced.
No, and some of this was dark, because I thought, even though as not someone that listens to the lyrics so much, but like I found the "I won't leave my wooden wife for you, sugar."
Oh, like, that's a fantastic song.
No, I know, but it's just like, it's kind of, no, I liked it, but I'm saying it was kind of like, it's got this that might have been one of the more bizarre songs on the album, because it's a lot of,
definitely.
It's almost like an old timey kind
it's
of
like
thing.
Mid 1800s, like mid 1800s-y, like antebellum Southie sort of sound,
Yeah, and then the lyrics are kind of like, he's like, I got this, I got a wife and kids, I got a dog, I got a picket fence, I can't leave my wife for you even when you come home from school. And I'm like, oh, that was.
Well, the lyrics
so
are
like
about
an underage kid. Yeah.
Well, but I got it more as like, it's like Once in a Lifetime by the Talking Heads, right? It's basically like, I'm in this suburban hellscape, or like Subdivisions by Rush is another example. Like, it's a long thing, like, because so many people move to the suburbs, I think, and kind of settle into that life and have kids and wives and stuff. Like, for people that don't go that route, like, it's like a suburbs of domestic life are revolting to me. And so I'm not saying that's necessarily the case, but that's what it is. It's total parody mixed with social commentary, super sardonic. So,
well, Stranded in Time was like that too, I thought. And it's interesting that those are the two prominent songs with the male vocal. So I don't know if that was really where he was coming from. But I actually, Josh, I did like the what was it? The Where Is Yesterday with the chant. It's got that Latin chanting, like the Gregorian chanting, and then it's got some very cool harmony parts, I think, that are kind of going on with that. But yeah, it's just a really interesting album. And there's some really cool rockings. I think, Josh, you're kind of hinting towards the more rocking songs that you liked, like Garden of Earthly Delights, which I actually, John, you're mentioning female vocalists. I heard Grace Slick in here a lot.
Yep.
I heard that too.
That would work too. Yep.
Yeah, particularly for that song. But Coming Down's a great. I guess it's not a guitar riff. It's probably a bass riff, but that's got a great bass riff. So even if you're, more, if you're looking for more straightforward traditional rock, I think that you are finding that in here. But if you want that across the album, this is not going to be for you. But if you like interesting stuff, I don't know. I thought this was a very entertaining listen, and I would recommend it for sure.
The album is like walking through the corridors of a funhouse, and every time you turn the corner, it's like a different motif. And so the track placement is fascinating to me, because you start from that sort of like dystopian sound of American Metaphysical Circus, and then you get into a straight ahead rock song where, yeah, I said like Debbie Harry singing psychedelic rock, but Grace Slick could work too, but not like blues oriented Grace Slick, the other version of her.
Right.
But and it's also called Hard Coming Love, which is freaking hilarious. So
Yeah.
and it's a song about just having sex straight ahead. And then from there, it takes you immediately to like when you turn the corner, song 3, like Cloud Song, which is basically this shoegazy sort of atmospheric song. And then they bring you, it's really pretty. And then they walk you into Garden of Earthly Delights, which has this pulsating drum and bass line sound and sound effects. And it gets like loose noisy at the end. And then it goes into that, antebellum sound of, track 5, which is I Won't Leave My Wooden Wife for You. It's just, like I said, it feels like you're walking in a fun house and every time you turn the corner, you're getting like a different background music and you're experiencing it. And to me, that's kind of like what psychedelic rock is supposed to be.
Yeah.
So I feel like this would line up more with what my trip would be than maybe the 13th Floor Elevators, which was a little bit more chaotic.
Well, actually, I've never tripped before, but I probably would rather trip that other album because I think this one would freak me out.
I think of the same thing, yeah.
Be careful what you wish for there, John. Jeez, this would be fun.
Well, they have a song called Love Song for the Dead Che, which is a hilarious song title, and then it sounds nothing like what you would expect. It's basically cafe rock,
right? Yeah, so it's very different.
Yeah, there's even there's even stuff that sounds sort of like the band Madness, who I like, sort of that almost, rustic sound of different stuff with drum beats, and it's hard to explain, but it kind of sounds like a Madness song in some ways. It's like I said, I can't recommend it for everybody because if you're not used to listening to avant-garde stuff or exploratory stuff, you might have the same experience that Josh has, where it's like, if I want my, more meat and potatoes, like rock that I can, really grab a hold of, or a sound that I'm familiar with, this is not the album for you. I can only imagine when this came out, by the way, we talked about the Monks seeming like it was from another planet. Like this must have been, like I said, it's very much the ethos of krautrock, that it is not tied to blues or R&B all the way down to not having a traditional guitar, right? So,
yeah, this was very much considered underground or experimental, for sure.
But I would say, Josh, that having said all that, I think that probably the songs that I like the most, and maybe I would change my mind if I listened to it even more, but I thought the Garden of Earthly Delights and Coming Down, which are 2 of the more rocking songs, are the ones that I think stood out more for me in terms of just overall enjoy. Like the chorus of Garden of Earthly Delights, where she repeats the inner eyes, and the way that she changes the way, the almost like the beats per measure there. I found that very interesting, but yeah, this is different for sure.
Yeah, every as there are variety, of songs and sounds and collages in this album, every song, had a very specific point of view that he was going for, and you can read more about those, like for example, the love song for Dead Che. I didn't mention this, but he, got into radical politics and became a member of the Communist Party. So that's kind of about those types of views and things like that. So I appreciate his like viewpoints and his desire to have a strong like artistic direction like that. But I guess like kind of what we've been saying, like I appreciate like the electronic stuff when it's in support of like guitars and everything, not when it's like the main focus, at least as of right now. Maybe maybe like
that. Go
yeah,
ahead, sorry.
Why?
I just think that this is
like
bass driven.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess yeah.
But John, I'm not
that thing.
I don't know if I'm getting that throughout the album, though. I think that I hear what you're saying for some songs, but I don't think that that's all over the place. And I think that from what I'm hearing from Josh is that, you need a little bit more backbone maybe to like the song, like the structure of the song rooted in something a little bit more rock based, and then pepper that with the strange stuff.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where my foothold into the genre made, at least how I can entry into that. So.
Well, and one of the things you're going to have to do is you're going to have to basically, if you go off of the idea that most rock that we've listened to in popular music all the way up through the 90s and 2000s is based around a blues or R&B structure, one of the things that, you know, as you get into things like krautrock or avant-garde music, right, and electronic music, that you're going to have to do is it consciously is not rooted in that, right? So it's going to sound different because, you know, it's not, you know, the guitar driven sound at the beginning or vocals. I think what I really liked about this album is there's a lot of bizarre sounds, like wooden blocks, drums played in a tittering way, not in a traditional way, like not hitting the drum in the middle of the drum, right? You know, instead they're using the drum as a complementary piece behind and not to keep the time. It's another sound, right? Slide whistles, organs, all kinds of stuff. But it never sounds gimmicky to me, and that's what I really appreciated about it. It's, you know, it can be, that type of stuff can be gimmicky when not done well, but you can tell these are folks that have real music knowledge because it never gets heavy-handed. At least for me, it did. It was always interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, the slide whistle is definitely prominent, and I would agree, John. I think that there's a lot of stuff going on, and it seems, I could definitely see how someone would say, well, it's all over the place, but to me, it is, but it also works all together. Like when they throw that slide whistle in there, they throw that little noise in there or whatever, I think it fits, you know? So
I think that's where the composing background comes in. His Joseph Byrd, you know, that's all intentional, clearly, or, you know, planned out, not just like, you know, to the wind.
Well, and I'm a drums guy, and I appreciate it that they use the drums in all kinds of interesting ways on this album. In the front, in the back, barely struck straight on, you know, basically any way you can use a drum with the exception of the traditional way of keeping the time, they used it.